You know why we're here? I know why we're here. We're talking about bad trains, bad locomotives, bad rolling stock, just everything's terrible. That's what you want, isn't it? This is what you wanted. So here it is. It's all yours. Straight from me to you. You monsters. Part 28. The Genset locomotives. Now, Genset locomotive can refer to several different actual designations, but I'm going to loop them all into one since they're all basically the same in terms of how they work and what they were meant for, and all effectively had the same problem. A Genset locomotive, instead of using a main prime mover, like a regular diesel locomotive would, it uses a whole bunch of smaller engines, often just regular truck diesel engines, usually between 2 or 3. Sounds friggin' weird, because it is. But the idea is twofold. A, you don't necessarily need the whole power unit for certain movements. I mean, if you're only moving a couple cars, you may not need that much horsepower. The Gensets allowed engineers or drivers, whichever country you're in, to switch off some of the engines when they didn't need them, only using 1 or 2. And therefore, it would save on emissions, improving efficiency, saving on fuel, and on paper, they sound great, wonderful, awesome. What's wrong with them? Well, it depends who you ask. For one thing, some companies got a lot of orders for them when they were first announced, and they decided to rush the production, meaning many showed up with a whole bunch of manufacturing defects, so that wasn't good. But that varied a lot between the manufacturers. It wasn't necessarily a blanket issue. Now, the general problem with Gensets has to do with just the overall design. For one thing, they're more complicated because they have more than one engine, but also, okay, yes, you are switching off 2 engines and using only 1, you're saving on emissions and fuel, in theory. Also, those engines you just turned off are now dead weight. They're just parts of the locomotive that are no longer doing anything. You realize a small switching unit wouldn't have this issue. It has 1 engine, but is smaller and therefore lighter on a... What was the thought process here? I don't understand. Also, having more engines meant there's more of a chance for an engine to fail and just not work. And many of the manufacturers put engines and generators within these locomotives that are non-standard in the railroad industry, making it more difficult to fix and more expensive to fix, increasing maintenance costs, which nobody likes. And since these engines were truck engines and not locomotive engines, it meant that they lacked the, shall we say, build quality to handle railroad operation. There was more stress on them, especially if you were using only 1, meaning they were more likely to break than a typical railroad prime mover would be. Also, engineers generally hated their guts. With a fiery passion. Because since they were only using 1 small engine, even if you were moving a comparatively small load, it took the engine forever to actually get the train up to speed, taking more time to do anything. Really, they weren't very good at much, by anyone's estimation. They made everyone angry, repeatedly, and in more recent years have fallen significantly out of favor. Though there are some short lines that have taken them, because those railroads have lighter trains. And in that context, Gensets can work, and it wasn't like the worst idea, but in practice, no. No, we're not doing that. You're not helping. I'm sorry. The Alco DH643s. Only 3 of these particular diesels were ever constructed, all for the Southern Pacific Railroad, built by Alco, obviously, in 1964, and they were awful. Yeah, they were pretty bad. I mean, at face value, they probably should have been okay. They were capable of 4,300 horsepower, which would have been pretty good for the 60s. But these are not typical Alco diesels. Most of the diesels Alco made were diesel electrics like EMD, and Alco can be described as a bit of a mixed bag in that regard, but some of their diesel electrics were pretty good, so what's wrong with these? Well, the problem with them is that they aren't diesel electrics. These are diesel hydraulics. Yeah. For one thing, Alco had little experience with diesel hydraulic technology. They were experimenting with it and discovered that they were actually pretty bad at this. They weren't really good at diesel hydraulics. They didn't really have time to figure it out. It was far too late in their existence to get experimental, proving that this decision was probably a mistake. Most of the information that they garnered when it came to making these came from German manufacturers. The hydraulic transmission, for example, was a German Voith design. And that's great, except that by using German designs, you therefore require German components. So that even if the diesels were working right, and they weren't, but if they were, let's assume they were, in order to fix them when they did eventually break or need regular maintenance, they needed to order foreign-made components. Stuff from across the friggin' ocean. When the diesel electrics didn't require that. Alco made all that in-house. So why the heck would Southern Pacific want to use these for any length of time? Well, as it turns out, they did not. They were retired within 9 years. All three being sold for scrap in 1973. The Sri Lanka Railway's M9. Sri Lanka! Hello! I actually have some fans down in Sri Lanka that do occasionally send me messages. I'm so glad you guys enjoy the videos, and one of them insisted I talk about the M9s. So I will. Constructed by Alstom. Why the heck does anyone order anything from Alstom? It's a serious frickin' question, okay? It's no wonder they and Bombardier merged. They're two peas in a pod when it comes to delivering bad frickin' rolling stock all the time, yet somehow staying in business. I don't get it. I can only assume they're almost always the lowest bidder in any situation. And guys, my nationally run railway networks all across the world. Do we not understand that we get what we pay for? I'm just saying. And the M9s were no exception to Alstom's reputation. They used V12 4-stroke diesel engines, which should have allowed for a power output of 3,200 horsepower. But naturally, any kind of power output requires the locomotives to be able to move at all, which it turned out over time they just couldn't do that anymore. A total of 10 were ordered back in 1997, and they were all delivered by the year 2000. Costing the Sri Lanka Railways 190 million rupees. However, by 2010, only 3 of the M9s were still functional at all. And towards the broken ones, well, if it wasn't the engines themselves straight up refusing to work, they also had issues with their engine control units, meaning they couldn't tell the engine to turn on, or turn off, or anything. But hilariously, one of their other issues is that they actually had a lot of problems with curving track. So turns. They couldn't turn without breaking something. Interesting. You know, in my experience, when it comes to any kind of railroading, the train being able to go around a corner, any corner, is usually a given. The M9s have friggin' bogies. What the heck is the deal? And Sri Lanka struggled to fix them because of how unaffordable spare parts for them were. And even when they got quotes from foreign firms, they also charged an arm and a leg to fix the blasted things. The first to return to service, 869, was down for 6 years, awaiting refurbishment. And they did eventually get them fixed. By September of 2010, she was back on the rails, working, somewhat. Well enough, all things considered, but it's just ridiculous. Like, we're paying millions of dollars to these friggin' companies to make rolling stock. And you think the bare minimum we could expect is that they function. They never do. Guys, this is capitalism 101, alright? Because there's two sides to the capitalist equation, okay? The producer and the consumer. If the producer is not giving you what you want, don't give them your money. This is actually very easy to do. Okay? Go anywhere else. You may pay a little bit more at first, but you'll get a product that actually works. You know? I'm just saying. Illinois Central Railroad, number 1. Yep, number 1. Numero uno. Not the original number 1. They just named her that after she was rebuilt. Because she didn't start her life as number 1. Nor would she end as number 1, as if you can see in the picture, she was eventually renumbered again to 2499. But originally, she was Illinois Central 7000 class 284 Berkshire number 7038. But in 1937, Illinois Central got a really great idea, just a top-tier decision, just a genius concept. Okay. They're gonna rebuild this Berkshire and turn her into a Hudson. A 464. Yes, absolutely. That'll go perfectly, and no, it will not, but anyway, that was their plan. She was reconstructed within their internal shops in Paducah, Kentucky, because they wanted her to haul fast freight trains, and a Hudson would, in theory, be better at doing that. At the time, they were dealing with a bit of a power issue, because while the Pacifics were no longer strong enough to handle the freight trains, their 282s, which were more powerful, couldn't go fast enough to handle the railroad's needs. And you might be saying, well, why not use the Berkshire they already had? Shouldn't the Berkshire be able to handle that? Well, yeah, in theory, but the Illinois Central 7000s in particular were prone to rough riding above 40 miles per hour, so they were trying to correct that problem as well. She was rebuilt into the Hudson form, renamed Number 1, and this went terribly. Just so bad. While in theory, she could go a lot faster with a smoother ride, the problem now was adhesion. It turns out, there wasn't enough weight on her drivers anymore, partially because she had, well, less drivers. She slipped and slid all over the lines trying to pull basically anything. The trains were just too darn heavy for her. She wasn't heavy enough to put her weight down on her drivers in order to actually pull the train forward, meaning she was just kind of stuck spinning her wheels. It was great. They did make an attempt to fix her by redistributing a lot of her weight and reduce her cylinder diameter from 27 to 24 inches. That particular change was meant to reduce the starting tractive effort to a level that the locomotive's grip on the rails could actually handle. And to be fair, this did kind of work. She was much better, but at this point IC decided not to convert any more locomotives to Number 1's specification. While the 7000 class as a whole was rebuilt, they did not change their wheel arrangement. Number 1 was a unique case. Her sisters went on to serve into the mid-50s, but Number 1 did not last that long. In 1945, she was renumbered to the aforementioned 2499, and they put her back on passenger service between Louisville and Fulton, Kentucky. She was officially retired in 1949, and sadly scrapped. The Napolene locomotive. What in the heck is that thing? Also, what is naphthalene? What am I talking about today? All right. Okay. So this was a very early attempt to utilize an alternative fuel source for a locomotive, in the form of naphthalene. There were people toying with other alternative power ideas to possibly replace or at least supplement steam locomotives. This is before diesels got going. And a lot of liquid fuels were looked into, like naphtha, petrol, benzol, and alcohol. But the problem with all of those is that they were just more expensive than coal. So there was really no benefit to using them at the time. However, naphthalene is a bit of a different story, because it originates from coal tar. They were already kind of mining it anyway in addition to the coal, and as a result, naphthalene was pretty cheap. The Schneider-Creusot company over in France decided it was a good idea to put together a locomotive that ran on naphthalene. However, there were some issues to work out, mostly that they were dealing with liquid fuels, right? Okay, so naphthalene can be in a liquid form. Not at room temperature. It is not a liquid if it's just sitting in, say, your room right now, unless your room happens to be unreasonably hot. Like 80 degrees Celsius, 176 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, if your room is that hot, I think your house is on fire. You should probably turn off the video and get out right now. I would rather you not die while watching this. I think it is more important to save your life than to see the end of this video. Please evacuate the building. Anyway, this particular prototype locomotive was standard gauge with a single cab, as well as a bonnet that contained the engine. It had 2 sets of buffers at different heights, and this was meant to couple with normal railway wagons and the flat wagons for internal industrial use. It was given an internal combustion engine based off of one from a car. capable of delivering only 67 horsepower, so this was a particularly weak locomotive, but it was meant to be an experiment. But how are they going to handle that solid naphthalene issue? Well, the engine wasn't started with naphthalene. No. They started it with petrol or benzene. And you might be saying, wouldn't that defeat the purpose of it running off of naphthalene? And the answer I say to you is, yeah, it absolutely would, but that's what they did. The tank for the naphthalene was enclosed in a water jacket, and the water was heated to the boiling point by engine exhaust. So, yes, in a way, it was also using steam power, too. Guys, at this point, is it worth it? Is it worth it? The answer I'd say to you, I scream at you, from 100 years in the future, it isn't worth it. And naturally, the transmission had to be weird as heck too, as it was called the Hautier Aerothermal Transformer. It was a pneumatic transmission system, which is exceedingly rare in general, and it consisted of an air compressor that was driven by the prime mover, which fed a compressed air motor, which then drove the wheels. And why they opted to do this instead of something, say, normal, I will never understand, because you already made something really complicated, but you made it even more complicated with this, and the end result was something that... Okay, in the interest of fairness, when she was tested, she did do exactly what they thought she was going to do. However, there were some slight problems with this particular design, namely that any cost savings you may have gotten from the naphthalene were irrelevant, due to the tremendously impossibly high maintenance protocol costs. In order to fix any issues on this locomotive design, it was a technical nightmare. In all cases, it was a pain in the butt. It was, in fact, more expensive as a result, even compared to the cheaper fuel, so it didn't matter. The design was not of interest to basically anybody, though similar designs were also toyed with around the world. France wasn't the only one. There was one sent to Algeria, but that was scrapped after only a few years, so you can see how well that went. There were some experiments in the UK that didn't amount to anything, and there was also other experiments as late as 1997 in Mexico. That also didn't amount to anything, because it's just one of those things where it's like, guys, you have to burn other fuel to use this fuel, and then you have to, if the maintenance is going to be more expensive as a result, to the point of completely obscuring, eclipsing the savings in fuel costs, it ain't worth it. I'm sorry. You tried your best. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.